come in front of me and I sex you.
Let's do it. And when I say that, let's do it, I mean, Democrats, let's do it, okay? Enough of being outgunned by right-wing misinformation, by right-wing disinformation. Important announcement today. BBC tells us that Comcast, known before as a cable company and somewhat of a conglomerate in the telecommunications space, is spinning off MSNBC and CNBC. Liberal billionaires, liberal foundations, even liberal companies. Now is your time. Now is our time. We need you. We've been getting crushed by disinformation for the last 30 years. Some of us were screaming about it years ago. I mean, you could pile one irony on another. I got my start on going on television shows, trained to be on camera like this because Fox News invited me on to fight with the conservatives on the show. I guess it created some theater. And yes, I went on MSNBC and CNN and some of the others too, and NPR and what have you. But the fact that it started with Fox, and then guess where I got my only paid gig ever to be on TV as an analyst? Why? It was the Sinclair Broadcast Network. They wanted me as their liberal analyst to fight with the conservative analyst and whatever dumb host they happened to have sitting there that day. And I did. And it was fun. And they paid me. And I think I made them look pretty stupid. Though they are good at that themselves, as they've proven. Point being, I got all of this training, all of this experience, and a lot of it came from conservative media. And no one was paying me except for Sinclair. What I was able to do was be an entrepreneur, create my own companies, and thankfully stay in this business, consult, and eventually wrote ads for Biden. But before that, do stuff for Everytown for Gun Safety, Bloomberg's Group, PR, their first digital PR that they had done in 2009 to about 2013, and numerous other things. But if that hadn't worked, I would have had to leave and do communications in the corporate arena, as numerous other very talented folks did. We've lost a generation of talent because you know what the right did? They created Heritage and AEI and said, hey, here's an endowed seat for $250,000. It's meant here's a place to place your arse. Go sit there and cause trouble. Write stuff that's bad about Bill Clinton or Barack Obama or whoever was the bête noire of the time. Go on television. Hey, we'll get you a contributorship from Fox or Sinclair or somebody, or Salem Radio, which owns local radio stations throughout the country and pumps us filled with their Christian nationalism garbage. They started about 40, 50 years ago. If any of you heard of the famous Powell Memo, or a conservative Democrat, he called himself then, was on the Supreme Court under Nixon, wrote a memo about how conservatives could come back from all the hippies and counterculture that were threatening business. It talked about taking over cultural institutions and creating ones that competed with them. So if you couldn't get your message on NBC, you created Fox. If you couldn't get your research, because it was obviously garbage you made up, like with crayons drawing on the floor, into Brookings, we had Heritage Foundation for you. If your lawyers were the types of people that were blackout drunks that couldn't remember what they did with their schlong at parties, like Brett Kavanaugh, well, we're no longer going to let the American Bar Association decide if they're worthy. We're going to get the Federalist Society to do that. We have barely responded. Media Matters, Think Progress, the Center for American Progress. Yeah, that's right. They discontinued the blog, Think Progress. We've never consistently put money in. Every 2 years or so, we parachute in for 6 months and think that when we're up against a 24/7, 365 days a year media machine of lies on the right, that we're going to be able to compete. And it also pushes corporate media to become even bigger liars than they already are, because they say to themselves, well, if the right is saying this, we have to be halfway between the left and the right's way the hell over there. I guess right would be on this side of mine. But then the middle is going to be here. So it made our, besides the fact that they're owned by corporate entities that won't let them say anything, choose not to endorse anybody. So let's get back to where we were. MSNBC and CNBC. Okay, MSNBC speaks for itself. Liberals already watch it. A lot of us have a lot of problems with it. I think some of the hosts there are terrible. There's a couple good ones. I like Lawrence O'Donnell a lot, a few others. But it still is too corporatized. It still repeats a lot of those kinds of points. There still are things I know from people who've worked there who said they cannot say on air. Why don't we take care of buying that? It's property already sitting there waiting to be expanded. And CNBC, see, that would be the strategy that the right is also employed. You guys know, I mean, if you read these outlets, let me give you a couple of them. The Hill, Newsweek, Politico, There were times when those were just centristy, boring mainstream media outlets, all bought by right-wing nuts, and they still contain the branding they once had, especially a national publication like Newsweek, right? And everybody still thinks it's supposed to be, you know, mainstream, moderate media. No, it's owned by right-wing nuts, and they've kept the branding. So now think about CNBC. I mean, who's that, you know, jackwad that's on there? I can't think of his name. That's the big Trump sycophant that Mark Cuban went on and just basically crushed on there. I can't even think of his name, and who cares what his name is anyhow? I'm sure most people who meet him don't remember his name, and if they do, they wish they didn't. Point being, it's already branded as this sort of center-right station. The beauty of if we were to take it over and go in, we don't need to do any rebranding. It's CNBC. You come on the next day, but we come on with our hosts and our perspectives, built in a way to reach beyond our own folks. So no more waiting. Look at what we're looking at. We're staring fascism in the face, and that is because of the news, the environment, the media atmosphere has been horrendous and gotten only worse over the last 20, 30 years. I mean, obviously, more recently with Musk and Twitter and the rest, they take over everything in sight, and we just sort of sit there on the sidelines, our billionaires, our companies, our wealthy people, and just say, hey, you know, write a book, and maybe we'll throw a $2,000 party for you. That's what happened, actually, when I wrote a book on John McCain. And one of the nastiest of the nasty, if you guys remember, the Swift voters, wrote a book in 2008 on Barack Obama. He was a birther. He lied throughout the book. And I got a couple $1,000 party thrown by the AFL-CIO to kick off my book, which I don't criticize them at all. That was very generous and kind of them. It's that nobody else did anything. And on the right, what happened with this guy? Somebody bought 500,000 copies of his book, and it was everywhere. It became... And I still hit the Amazon bestseller list because I had to work my butt off promoting it everywhere, while this guy probably had a whole marketing team. We can't win this way. We lose. We still do sometimes, which is incredible how often we win. It just shows you how much they have to put into lying to people and tricking people. But it also shows you that that's why Donald Trump won this time. With a normal media atmosphere where people of media that wouldn't say, well, he seemed to really enjoy the music of Ave Maria, and said, hey, that crazy afro was swaying back and forth like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and we thought he might actually fall over at some point and break through the ground, and had no idea what he was doing for half of the time he was up on stage and wanted to listen to 27 different versions of the same song. That would have been an accurate portrayal of what happened. But you didn't get that from the New York Times or anybody else. So I will end this where I began. Do it, Democrats. MSNBC and CNBC will be available. Stop, at least put a dent, a small dent, in the dominance right wing has when it comes to overall media, whether it be cable, whether it be network, whether it be, you know, online, offline. I mean, you know, local radio throughout this country, newspapers. We must fight back. You start by doing this. Show you're serious, and then acquire a lot more properties so we can compete. And that, friends, is my rant for today.